So tell us, Luca, what are you expecting today? Less than 12 hours. What are we going to hear?
Well, first of all, I'm expecting relief because it has been a long time coming, and of course it was long overdue, a stress test on European banks. But probably the market are expecting too much, are expecting to read too much into this test. I don't think there will be any large surprise. As rumored by many institutions, there will be probably a few banks who are going to fail the stress test. For these few banks, this communication will probably come with a plan for restructuring, so a plan for making the bank able to pass a further stress test if there is any other stress test coming in the future, or if there is actual stress.
It all sounds kind of benign. I mean, isn't there a worry that they all come back and most of them pass, and then investors think, well, actually, that doesn't make me that much more confident at all?
Well, maybe something that does not make me comfortable either is the fact that probably the stress that are imposed for this stress test, so the stress scenario, is too much centered on sovereign default or something like this than on economic slowdown.
You think that there's a bigger threat to an economic slowdown than there is of a sovereign default in Europe?
I think so, because European institutions have proven in the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 months that they will do anything to prevent a sovereign default in the Eurozone. So I think the real problem is what is going to be the European impact of the measure of austerity. For example, we were talking about Spanish austerity plan on the real economy, on the balance sheet of the banks, but on their private exposure to the private sector and not to the public sector.
So you're concerned that perhaps these tests aren't going to be stressful enough in terms of the economic growth that they're expecting or that they're testing?
You know, as I said before, they were decided in December, where the outlook on sovereign was much more riskier than it is now, and when we didn't know what the European institution would do in front of a risk of a default. Now we really do know that they will do whatever they can to save a country from defaulting, but they cannot do much for the real sector of the economy, and this is where the test should be more stressful for the banks, because banks' exposure to the private sector is still huge, of course.
So very quickly, would you then say that what determines the success or failure of these tests is not necessarily how many banks pass or fail, but how much we get to know about the actual tests themselves?
Look, these tests are useful because it adds transparency. It adds transparency on a potentially very important problem as a sovereign default, so it is welcomed.
Okay.
But it's not going to tell you if there are going to be real problems for European banks related to the European economy.
Okay.